Welcome to another episode of Biblical Panorama, a program where we try to give a perspective on the Bible. So welcome to this episode where we are going to look at an interesting discussion, an interesting topic. I know that there are many times when we have heard that the Greek word agape means divine love. And so we want to try and look at that this evening. So please share the link. Welcome to those who are on Facebook, Isaac Chiokoma page, and those who are on Biblical Panorama, both the Facebook and also the YouTube page. I do hope that you have subscribed to the Facebook page as well as to the YouTube page, Biblical Panorama. And as we always say, if you have any Bible questions or issues that you may be dealing with, please feel free to share so that when we have time, we may give a perspective. We do not claim to have a summary of wisdom. It's just an additional voice that we may have pertaining to those particular issues. And we may not even resolve the issues because, as you know, some of the issues, inconclusive, so to say. So we are here to give a perspective. So welcome. Our topic for this evening is does the Greek word agape always mean divine love? That's what we are going to delve into. Let me mention from the outset that when we are doing linguistic studies, language studies pertaining to biblical languages, we have to look across the spectrum of the biblical literature. And when you're dealing with word meanings, sometimes there is what is called the root fallacy. To think that the meaning of the word is in the root or etymology of that particular word, and then it ends there. Sometimes you have to look at the context of a given word, as we have said before. In biblical interpretation, context is key. And so you have to do a study of the word. You have to look at all the occurrences of a word, whether it is in the Old Testament or the New Testament, in order for you to conclusively say that this word only means this. And so one of the things that we always have to do is to refer to the original languages so that we can look at the specific words and then work out what those particular words could have meant. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily be a student of Greek and Hebrew. If you are a theologian, it's even more helpful. But here we are here to simplify things, not necessarily to speak to theologians only. We want to simplify things so that our lay members could also appreciate the Bible in its fullness. In fact, that is the task that we have. That's the task that we have. That's the task that we have. And so let me get started on this. having given that particular background. So one of the things that, especially when you are dealing with Greek studies, is that you may not ignore the Septuagint. Now, for those who may not have been in a seminary or done theology, the Septuagint is simply a translation of the first, let me say that the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. I am sure that many of our members are aware of this. And then the New Testament was written in Greek. Now, if you follow Daniel's prophecy, you will see that there was a succession of kingdoms. And so after the Medo-Persian kingdom, we have the Babylonian kingdom, we have the Medo-Persian kingdom, and then we have the kingdom of Greece, and their language was Greek. And after the Empire of Greece, we have the Romans with their language of Latin. So the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, the New Testament was written in Greek, what is commonly referred to as Koine Greek or Common Greek, which is a feminine adjective. Now, when one of the Ptolemies, remember after Alexander the Great died, the kingdom, the empire rather, was split among 4 generals. And the general who took over the Egyptian side was called Ptolemy. All right. That particular Ptolemy set out on an ambitious project at Alexandria to build the largest library. In fact, he wanted to have all the books in the world at that time, in the library which was at Alexandria. And at one point, they saw that they were missing a cardinal section or a cardinal writing, which was the Hebrew Bible. And so what Ptolemy did was to send a request Jerusalem to the high priest. Eleazar must have been his name, the high priest, so that they could send men. Actually, they chose 6 from each tribe. And so there were 72 in total. Now, scholars sometimes, they argue between the number 70 or 72. It's give and take. But that's why they came up with this Septuagint with the Latin LOXX to mean 70. So it could have been 70, it could have been 72, but give and take. And so what Ptolemy wanted to do was that since we had Jews of the diaspora, Jews who were living in Egypt, he wanted to have the Bible in Greek instead of Hebrew only. And, so he asked that a project be undertaken so that the Old Testament be translated into Greek from Hebrew. That's where we see the genesis of what is referred to as the Septuagint. So the Septuagint is simply a translation of the Hebrew scriptures into the Greek language. Now, the project that was at the outset had mainly to do with the Pentateuch. Scholars are not really sure at which point the rest of the Hebrew canon was written. And so that's one of the things that remains under discussion and continuous research. But the story suffices in terms of how the project was undertaken, and how the books were translated. The first 5 books of Moses were translated from Hebrew to Greek. So, and when you look at the New Testament, you will discover that some of the allusions, some of the quotations or references to the Old Testament actually allusions that are gotten from the Septuagint. So it appears as if Jesus and his disciples commonly or frequently referred to the Septuagint. And so the Septuagint itself is something that can be studied. Actually, there's even a dictionary on the Septuagint. There's even a grammar on the Septuagint. I have been privileged, to study it to that extent. But we should mention that when we are dealing with biblical languages, the Septuagint is a must, especially with Greek, because you have Greek in the Old Testament in the form of the Septuagint, and also now the Greek New Testament. All right. So allow me to share my screen so that you can follow with me in terms of what I would like to present to us. Let me see if I can share my Bible software here, so that you follow with me on the screen. Let me see this will work. All right. So I do believe that you are able to follow this with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to maximize especially the English part, so that at least you are able to see in terms of the font size. All right. So on one side I have the Septuagint, and on the other side I have the English, and I'm going to go side by side. So as we start this journey, there are some texts that I'd like to read to us, and then we see which Greek word has been used for love, and then we will be answering a few questions as we go along, in order for us to arrive at a conclusion as to whether agape is exclusively used to depict divine love. The first reference that I have, and we have got many references, but in the interest of time, the first reference that I have here is one that is found in 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 26, when David was mourning the loss or the death of Saul, as well as Jonathan. As you know, David and Jonathan shared a warm relationship of love. Now, this is what it says here pertaining to the words that David mentioned concerning Jonathan. So he says in 2 Samuel 1 verse 26, let me make it bigger again. He says, I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant. I'm using the English Standard Version. It says, very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary. All right. So here we have David, who is lamenting over the death of Jonathan, and he says about Jonathan that his love was extraordinary to him. Now, if we come this other side and look at the Septuagint, which word has been used for love in this particular case? Su emoi agapesis. Agape. Agape is the word which has been used for this word love in our English translations, in our English versions. Now, what kind of love is this between David and Jonathan? One may say this was brotherly love, but here we see that David is using agape to depict the kind of love that existed the kind of camaraderie that existed between him and Jonathan. And it continues, the text continues to say, surpassing the love of women, surpassing the love of women. You see, this is the first Greek word here, agapesis, and then we have another one, agapesin, the love of women, gunaikon, the love of women, surpassing the love of women. If what we know to be the distinction that is made between agape and phileo, many people say that phileo is the one that depicts brotherly love. Then the translators of the Septuagint would have used phileo instead of agape. And even when it comes to talking about the love of women here at the end of this same verse, they would have used, another Greek word for love as opposed to agape, since many people tell us that agape was being used for portraying or depicting divine love. But here we see that David is making reference to the love of women. And when he's talking about the love of women, he is not using eros or any other Greek word for love, but he uses agape. Uh, he uses agape in order to depict that kind of love. All right. So that's one element. Let's go to the next one. There is also another reference in the story of Amnon and Tamar in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1 to 15. I'm going to quickly read through this so that we can follow together, and then we see how this story also plays out. All right. So this other side, I have the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and then this other side, I have an English version for which we are going to follow, and then we will be checking this other side in the Septuagint to see which word has been used for love. All right. Now, Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved her. So here we have Absalom and his half sister Tamar. And we are told that after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved Tamar. All right, this is in verse 1. So we come this side in order to check which Greek word has been used for love. The love between, let me say, the love that Amnon had for Tamar, all right? Which, in this case, because Tamar was a half-sister, one would say this was incestuous love, all right? So, which word has been used is agapesen, or rather, we will say agapao, because this is a verb now. In other words, it's the same. The cognate is agape. So we find that this love that Amnon is having for Tamar has been said to have been agape love. All right. And maybe someone may say, well, perhaps this is just the first occurrence. But let's read on. And Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. So Amnon has got this guy who is a friend, apparently is a cousin, according to our tradition, or a brother, so to say. And he said to him, O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me? Amnon said to him, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. All right, here again, we have the word love. And this is verse 4. So I am on the Greek side now, trying to look for the Greek word which has been used for love. And I find it here, agapo. All right. In this case, it has contracted because this is a contract verb since the stem ends in a short vowel. So it's the same agapao. I love, I love Tama, my brother Absalom's sister. So agape again, or rather agapao, the verb agapao is the one which has been used to demonstrate what Amnon is feeling for his sister Tamar, half sister Tamar. All right, verse 5. Jonadab said to him, lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, said to him, let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat and prepare the food in my sight that I may see it and eat from her hand. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let my sister Tamar come and make a cup of cakes in my sight that I may eat from her. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house where he was lying down, and she took dough and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, send out everyone from me. So everyone went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the chamber that I may eat from your hand. And Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. But when she brought them near him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come lie with me, my sister. Verse 12, she answered him, no, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be as one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. But he would not listen to her. And being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. Verse 15, that's my verse of interest. Then Amnon hated her with very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love which he had loved her. And so we have got two words which have been used to depict the love that Amnon had for his half sister Tamar in verse 15. And now we go to the Greek side to check which word has been used. Here we have the first one, agape, the noun in the accusative case, agape. He hated, the love with which he had loved her, the love with which he had loved her. Then we have the verb agapesen, he loved her. Also using the verb agapao. So the question therefore that we may have to ask is this: how does agape in this particular case, in the story of the story of Amnon, and also the story of David and his friend, his colleague Jonathan, how does that signify divine love? How does the incestuous relationship between Amnon and Tamar signify divine love if agape meant divine love? Mind you, these people who were translating from Hebrew to Greek, they knew the language well. And if that was the understanding that agape means divine love, they would have obviously not used that particular word in that context. They would have substituted it for something else. But because, as I will suggest as we go on, that agape was probably just one of the words for love, and did not attain the significance with which we have given it. We see that they are freely using agape to depict an incestuous relationship between Amnon and Tamar. The same vein, David uses the word as he is talking about the love which he had for Jonathan. Not only that, he also talks about the love of women, and he is using the word agape. All right. Now, let's go to the New Testament, and then I'll have a few references there for us, and then let's see what the Bible here has for us. I come to the New Testament, and I will be all right. Let me remove the Septuagint, and then I am going to add the Greek New Testament side by side with the English version. Do I want to swap them? All right, this is okay. So we have the English on the left side. I'm not sure on which side of your screen, but on my screen is the English is on the left, and then I have put the Greek New Testament on the right side so that we can confirm. Remember, for the sake of our lay people, I am using more the English, and then we check the Greek this side for those who are theologians, those who have done Greek. So here I have a few texts. Let me start from the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John. In fact, I need to mention John chapter 3, verse 35. John chapter 3, verse 35, and then also John chapter 5, verse 20. All right? I pick these two statements because they are very similar. So here it says, the Father loves the Son and has given all things into his hand. Okay? The Father loves, agape. So agape has been used, right? And someone may say, okay, so this is divine love indeed, because the Father loves the Son. Since the Father is divine and the word agape has been used, therefore it should be making reference to a special kind of love which is divine. All right. Now, in the same book, in the same Gospel of John, listen to what John chapter 5, verse 20 says. It says again here, John chapter 5, verse 20 says, so, for the Father loves the Son and shows him all things that he himself is doing. All right, I won't read the rest of it. Now, look at these two texts. They are quite similar in what is being said here. The Father loves the Son and has given all things into his hand. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing. All right? Father loves, Father loves. Which word here? John 3:35, we have agape. What about John 5, verse 20? The Father loves. The Greek word is right here. It's philia. All right? From phileo, I love. So we see again that God, who is divine, John records, and actually these are the words of Jesus himself, because we need to make this this distinction. As you know, many of the Bibles that are written in English, especially for the Gospels, if the words were spoken by Jesus himself, you see that they're in red, while the others written by the Gospel writer or the evangelist, as we commonly refer to them, will be in the normal font, the normal color, which is black. Okay, so John reports that the Father loves the Son and has given all things into his hand. Here Jesus himself says, for the Father loves the Son. And this is a similar kind of statement. But the second occurrence here in these two texts that I'm trying to compare, we don't have agape, but we have phileo. And yet, if God loves the Son, and we would say that this is some kind of divine love, why would Jesus or John, the writer, not use agape exclusively if that is what it meant to depict divine love. Instead, here we have phileo, which has been used. All right. So it doesn't end here. Now, before I come to John chapter 21, because this is where I'm going to end the presentation, I want to find, I have another reference, 2 Timothy 4 verse 10. 2 Timothy 4 verse 10. I had already put it here. Let me quickly go to it. I think I skipped it. 2 Timothy 4 verse 10. It must be before the ones that I was looking at. Yeah, it's right here. 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 10. Here we see that Paul is writing to Timothy and he is reporting, about Demas who deserted him. All right. This is what Paul says. He says, "For Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia." All right, now let's go back. Our interest is in the word love, which has been used. "For Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica." So Paul is complaining, or rather is reporting to Timothy about a gentleman by the name of Demas who left the work of God due to his love for the, should I say, pleasures of this world, or due to the love that he had for this world. Okay? Demas, a person, loved this world and deserted Paul, the mission that Paul had, and then went to another place. So here, love. What word has been used for love? And when you come to the Greek, we'll see that is agapesis. And this is a participle. So it comes from agapao, the verb agapao. How would Paul use agape, so to say? How would Paul use agapao to depict the love that a human being by the name of Demas had for the present world and instead of the work of God? If agape means divine love, why would Paul use the love that Demas had for this present world? Maybe he would have found another Greek word for love to use instead of agapesis, instead of agapao, which, as we have been told by many preachers, actually means divine love. So I hope that you follow this particular sense. All right. Now, as I go to the conclusion, I want to go to the crux of the matter, because this is where many sermons have been preached. Many sermons have been preached. The dialogue, the post-resurrection dialogue between Jesus and Peter in the last chapter of John chapter 25. And I'll just start reading from John chapter 25, verse 15 to 17. Okay? And after that, I will go back to the beginning, almost to the beginning, and also demonstrate something else. Okay, here we are. John chapter 21, verse 15 to 17. Many times we have heard preachers, preaching that Peter did not understand the question of Jesus. While Jesus was using the Greek word agapao, Peter was answering in phileo. And some have even said that it's only at the third attempt that Peter now understood that Jesus was talking about agapao and not necessarily phileo. So let's look at this. John chapter 21, verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Okay, this was after Jesus found them at the lake. I'll actually go back to that because there is something else again which shows us this, root fallacy thing, which I was talking about from the outset. So when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than this? Okay. So in the first occurrence, Jesus uses agapas. And again, this is a second person singular present indicative for agapao. So this is the verb that Jesus uses is agapao. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than this? Okay, that's the first question. He said to him, this is Peter now responding to the question of Jesus. Peter says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. All right. What word has been used for love in this particular response of Peter? Let me pull up the Greek here so that we check. There it is, philo. Again, this is what we call a contract verb. It has contracted. Actually, it's supposed to be phileo, but this form is also okay because the loss of the epsilon is compensated for by the circumflex on top of the, should I say, vowel omega, which is at the end here. All right. So it's philo, which is I love. So he says to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. All right. And the preachers here have taken off and say, you see, Jesus says, do you agapao me? While Peter answers and says, I phileo you. All right. Then Jesus again says to him, there's an instruction kind of that Jesus gives at the end of each of these, should I say, questions. All right. Then he says to him, feed my lambs. All right. Let's go to verse 16 for the second question. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? All right, love is our keyword. What is the Greek showing us here? Agapas. Again, second person, present active indicative of agapao. All right. So Jesus repeats, first time agapao, second time agapao. Simon, son of John, do you love me? What's the response of Peter? He says to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. I love you. What word has Peter used in order to respond to the question of Jesus for the second time? He uses the same one, phileo or philo, which is the same thing. I phileo you or I philo you. Um, I love you. So what I'm seeing here is that Peter is consistent with his response. 1 and 2, Jesus has also been consistent with his question, the first question and the second question, in terms of the verb that he uses to ask if Peter loves him. All right. And again, you see, at the end, Jesus gives the instruction, tend my sheep. In the first occurrence, he said, feed my lambs. In the second instruction, he says, tend my sheep. All right, I'll come to that in a little while. The third question now, this is where, it's quite revealing. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? All right. Which word has been used for love in the Greek? The third time when Jesus asks, third and final, I should add, third and final time when Jesus, interacts with Peter. Here it is, phileo. When Jesus asks Peter the third time, he doesn't use the word agapao. He uses the word phileo. Do you phileo me? Now, if Jesus was trying to get Peter to change his answer from phileo to agapao, why would Jesus ask for the third and final time using phileo instead of agapao? That's something for us to think about. So Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, this is now John reporting. Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time. Now, this is another revealing, thing here. John tells us that Peter was grieved because Jesus said to him for the third time, "Do you love me?" Now, which word has John used in order to give us a report of the conversation that took place between Jesus and Peter? Do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" John uses the word phileo, is right here, phileis, and it's a question mark. In Greek, a question mark is a half colon for our English thing. So he says to him, "Do you love me?" Now, I may pause here and ask a question as well. Jesus has asked Peter three times the question, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" Excuse me. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Thrice. When John, the writer of the gospel, reports the reaction of Peter, that Peter was aggrieved because Jesus had asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" Why would John say to us, report to his audience, and by extension us, to say that Jesus had asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" And instead of John using agapao, he uses phileo. All right. I don't know if you pick the sense. And how does it become the third time? In the sense that Jesus has used two words, agapao and phileo. Remember, the first question he uses agapao, the second question he uses agapao. But for the third time, he doesn't use agapao. Instead, he uses phileo. And then when John himself is reporting, he says, Peter was upset that Jesus had asked him for the third time, "Do you love me?" And the word that John uses for our English love is phileo instead of agapao, which means that, in the mind of John, and this is one feature that we see in the Gospel of John, that John uses a lot of synonyms. These words, and in this context, for John, they may just have been synonyms, words that mean possibly one and the same thing, and they could be used interchangeably without any special significance attached to either of them. Otherwise, well, maybe before I make that conclusion, let me finish this text, verse 17, and then uh, Peter now answers and says to Jesus, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." What does Peter say again for the third time in response to the third question of Jesus? He says, "Lord, you know that I love you." What is the Greek word which is used? Lord, kurie, you know that I love you. You know that I love you. Here, philo. Peter is consistent. Question 1, he uses phileo. Question 2, he uses phileo. Even the final time he responds to Jesus, he uses phileo. He doesn't change to agapao. The first time Jesus asks, he uses agapao. The second time he uses agapao. The third time he uses phileo. If Jesus wanted Peter to respond with agape or agapao, he would have been also consistent with agapao in his questioning. And if Peter had finally changed from phileo for the third time to answer back and say, "I agapao you," then maybe at that point we would have said, yes, Peter was missing it. But the third time he got it, because the question of Jesus agreed with the response of Peter. But in this case, this is not what we are having. Jesus asks, number one, do you agapao me? Do you agapao me? Number three, he says, do you phileo me? All right. Peter is consistent. I phileo you, I phileo you, I phileo you. All right. In this particular case, Jesus again gives him the third and final instruction. In this case, he says, feed my sheep. All right. So these words, if you look at these comprehensively, remember where we are coming from. We started with the Septuagint, and we showed in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 26, David and Jonathan agapao, for brotherly love. And David also there says that, the love of women, and is using agapao. All right. We come to the issue of Amnon and Tamar. It's agape consistently throughout. How can incest be seen to be, divine love? All right. And when we come here also in the New Testament, in 2 Timothy 4, verse 10, Demas deserts Paul, goes to Thessalonica, and Paul says that Demas loved this present world, and he uses agape instead of any other word. Is that divine love? What about here in John chapter 21, verse 15 to 17, where many preachers have preached talking about agape having this special significance, and they use this particular passage, and while many preachers use this particular passage, I am yet to hear of one who has also tried to make a distinction and say that there are two things that are involved here. What would we say, for example, to the instruction that Jesus was giving to Peter at the end of these questions and his responses? The first one, he says, I will concentrate on the last noun, feed my lambs. We can also look at the verb, the imperative which is given, but in the interest of time, I'll just look at my lambs, all right? When Jesus asked John the first time, do you love me? And Peter, the first time, and do you love me? And then Peter responds and says, I love you. Jesus gives the instruction. He says, feed my lambs. Okay? In the second question, do you love me? Peter responds, I love you. And then he says to him, tend my sheep. Now look at the Greek words which have been used. Feed my lambs is the Greek word anion. Okay? And then at the second instance, tend my sheep, the word that has been used is probaton. All right? Is probaton. Right here, probata. From probaton. It's a neuter noun. All right? And then for the third time, feed my sheep, it's the word again, probaton. Would we say that Jesus was, I have seen some people have said, no, these others were small sheep and these others were the big ones. Would we really say that? Or we would be safe to conclude that Jesus, was using synonyms. He was talking about one and the same group. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep, probata, anion. Actually, both of them are neuter nouns. Would we say that for the first question, Jesus was talking about something else, and for the second question and the third, where probaton or probata is used, Jesus was again talking about other types, of sheep? That's something for us to think about. All right. Now, let me end this way by going back to the beginning of this particular chapter, from verse 5 to 13, because there is something which many people have ignored, and yet it has got implications in terms of how we understand the scriptures. All right, let me see. All right, it's right here. John chapter 21, verse 5 to 13. Remember, this is after the resurrection. Jesus comes to them after, Peter has said to the friends, I go fishing, and the rest of them go, and then they don't catch anything for the night. Then Jesus comes to them. And in verse 5, he says to them, now the word that I would like you to pay attention to is the word fish, which is used in this passage from verse 5 to 13. Jesus said to them, children, right? Do you have any fish? Okay, there is fish. Which word has been used for fish here? Prosphagion. Do you have any fish? Prosphagion. All right? And they answered him and said, no. Okay? They answered him and said, no. Then verse 6, he said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. So they cast it. And now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of the fish. So I'm right here again on the word fish. Okay? Because of the quantity of the fish. Okay? I put it there. Fish. Which word has been used for fish in verse 6? Remember in verse 5, prosphagion. In verse 6, the word is right here. All right? Ichthus, ichthwon, for the genitive plural. All right? But otherwise, the dictionary form is ichthus, for fish. So we are having two words, all of them talking about fish, which have been used in this particular text. Prosphagion as well as ichthus. And I want to take note of these particular counts. Prosphagion in verse 5, and then in verse 6, ichthus. All right? That disciple, verse 7, that disciple whom Jesus loved, therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of what? Full of fish. Which word has been used here for fish? In verse 8, it's ichthus. Ichthus, right? Dragging the net full of fish. And full of fish. Verse 8 here, right here. Okay? Ichthus is the word that has been used right here. This is the Greek word, ichthon, again the genitive plural, full of fish. For they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. Verse 9, when they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. Fish again is here in verse 9. What is the Greek word that has been used? Opsarion. Opsarion. All right? Opsarion. When they come out, Jesus says, do you have any prosphagion? They say no. He says, cast out the net on the right side. They do that. What do they bring out? Ichthus. And, they drag that same ichthus onto the shore. As they come, they realize that is Jesus, and then Jesus, has already set a charcoal fire in place with some fish laid out, and the word that is used is opsarion, and also is having some bread, a toss, as he is by the shore there. Then Jesus now says to them, he now speaks to them. Since now they have put out, they are here, they are on the land. Jesus says, you bring some of the fish that you have just caught, some of the fish. Now, Let's look at the Greek word which has been used for the fish, which the disciples have caught, which Jesus tells them, you bring some of the fish that you have caught. In verse 10 is the word opsarion. Opsarion. Now, and someone may be saying, well, they brought out ichthus. This is very clear. From verse 6 and 8, they bring out ichthus. Okay? Verse 6 and 8 here. Because the net was full of ichthus, this fish. All right? And then verse 8 also, the other disciples came in, they dragged this net full of ichthus. But when Jesus tells them to say, you bring some of that fish, he doesn't use ichthus, he uses opsarion. The question we should ask is it the same fish or it's different fish? The answer obviously will be the same fish. Here again, we see that John is using synonyms, different words to say the same thing. And this is the context. It's in the same context, it's in the same passage, you know, a precursor before, a precursor for verses 17 to, 15 to 17, which is going to be talking about agapao, phileo, you know, love in those, you know, two Greek words. Why is it that we have never heard anyone preaching about John 21, verse 5 to 13, and say that these are different fish? They are not the same fish. Our understanding is that when they bring out the fish, there's a different Greek word that is used. When Jesus says, you bring that fish, he uses a different word. Our understanding is that is referring to the same fish which the disciples have caught. This is a synonym, you know, and this is John's style, where he uses synonyms. And writers, you know, use the synonyms so that they avoid monotony. Sometimes it doesn't mean that because they have used this word, then the root will maintain whatever meaning it may have gotten in a particular context. That particular word could be used, you know, in a different, should I say, setting, and having a different meaning, and so forth. So let's finish this up. So Simon went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish. Which word? Ichthus. This is verse 11. He uses ichthus. Okay? So, and actually the number here is given. There were 153 of them. So Jesus says, bring some opsarion. Simon goes to get the net full of large ichthus, 153. Are we still talking about the same fish? The answer is yes, but we are having different words referring to the same thing. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Then verse 12, Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now, none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. So Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish, which is the last word that has been used for fish, opsarion. Okay? So, in this particular text from John chapter 5, John chapter 21, verse 5 to 13, we are having prosphagion, ichthus, ichthus, opsarion, opsarion, ichthus, ichthus, ichthus. You know, different Greek words talking about fish within the same passage. Obviously, these are synonyms. If we read a few verses later from verse 15 to 17, why should we apply a different concept than to that which has preceded that? You know, I would therefore submit that, you know, agape and phileo, agapao and phileo were actually synonyms, as opposed to the special significance that we have attached to agape throughout. We cannot transfer one context and apply it across the spectrum, so that that word, since it has got that root, then it should always mean that. As we have seen in the case of David and also Amnon and Tamar, it wouldn't make sense to say that agape is divine love. As we have also seen in the case of Demas, who deserted Paul, it doesn't make sense to say that Demas had divine love for the world. And, that's why he left. Uh, they abandoned the ministry with Paul. And also, let me just add that, studies have been shown, have been done by scholars, and it has been proved that even in secular Greek literature, contemporary secular, Greek literature of the first century and so forth, the word agape was being used even by the pagans. So if the pagans were using it, the word agape, and yet they had nothing to do with God, how would then, this word agape have that particular, meaning with it? So this is where I call it, uh, an end. Yeah, we have taken much time because it's something that we really needed to explain. But I hope that you have benefited from this particular sharing. So, agape, it is my submission that the word agape does not always mean divine love. It doesn't always mean divine love. And so, um, in the famous passage of John chapter 21, is actually a synonym of phileo. And so, may the good Lord bless you as you look at this perspective and, you know, go out there and, share with others. Remember to share the link and also send in some of the questions that you may have, so that we may look at those and give a perspective, a biblical perspective at another point. So may the good Lord bless you. See you next time on Biblical Panorama. Remember to subscribe to the Facebook page as well as to the YouTube channel. Be blessed.